Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I'm joined by Pete Mohan and Pete Worth. How you doing, fellas?
Howdy.
Doing wonderful, Mike. Doing wonderful.
You still in Baltimore, neighbor?
I know I am home after many days of awful travel, but 3 days in the lovely inner harbor of Baltimore, so...
That ain't bad.
It is nice. It's a nice spot.
Yeah, it was nice. Mm-hmm.
So we've got a special guest for you on the show today, ladies and gentlemen. As you already know by the title of this podcast, we have, for the first time, Ben Steele from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, the Marquette men's basketball beat reporter, on the pod. Ben, thanks so much for joining and welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Like I said before we started recording, first podcast in my life, first Skype call in my life. This is
it's a big day.
This is awesome for me. So yeah, this is huge.
For 2 years, being on the Real Chili Pod has been on your bucket list. So, right?
Yeah, it's all downhill for me after this. Just dream. This is the dream job for me. I don't want to sound like a technophobe or anything. I'm not against Skype or anything. I want to get that out of the way.
You don't want the Twitter blowback from being anti-Skype.
Yeah, I get enough of that.
Well, we're so thrilled to be able to have you on the show today. I think for folks who don't already know, and just to reiterate, Ben covers the Marquette men's basketball beat for the Journal Sentinel. You can find all his good content on the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel website. He's got dozens, maybe hundreds of articles just since he started earlier this year, and he's a great follow on Twitter for everything you need to know about Marquette basketball. And Ben, I want to start off with this. I started with a very similar question for Matt Velasquez when we talked to him about a year ago. And the question is, before you got this job, which was it June? Was it over the summer when you first officially got the job?
I think it was in September, actually. So like right before, or late August, early September. So
recent.
Pretty close to when the season started.
So before you officially came on board, did this beat, what was your familiarity with Marquette basketball? Had you known about them for a while, or was it kind of a crash course in learning everything you had to know?
No, well, I've been working at the newspaper since 2005.
Okay.
I've been obviously watching Marquette ever since then. I knew about Marquette before then, but watching them on a consistent basis, 2005 on, back when Rowsey was covering.
Sure.
Well, that's really when we started being fans, is 05 when we started at Marquette.
End of the Crean era, start of the Buzz Williams era, transitioning to now, and didn't watch them obviously as closely as I do now, but I'm very familiar with the last decade plus of Marquette basketball.
Don't forget the Mike Hunt era.
So you started at the Journal Sentinel in 2005, and was that kind of a entry level, and you worked your way up from there? And what, if so, what different kind of posts did you have since then?
I've had pretty much every job you can have at the newspaper. When I started, I was a part-time copy editor. I graduated from Madison in 2002. If you want me to see myself out now.
I was going to say, yeah, I didn't see that anywhere in your bio. So, yeah, now that this is out, yeah, we might have anarchy in our hands.
Yeah, I'm expecting the Skype call to just snap to a complete halt. I graduated from college in 2002, and then I worked at the Wisconsin State Journal newspaper in Madison for 3 years. I was a high school reporter, just covering everything, gymnastics, wrestling, you name it, around the Madison area. My wife, she was my girlfriend now. She also worked in the newspapers. She got a job first at the Journal Sentinel, and then she got a job here in 2004. And then I was trying to find any way I could to get on board there, and I just took a part-time copy editing job, 2005. After that, man, I've been the occasional writer, web producer, page designer. Yeah, you name it, man. I've done everything for the place, and I'm a huge basketball fan. Been that way my whole life. Always wanted to take a crack at the the beat reporting gig, and always kind of had my eye on the Marquette job. So when it cropped up this year, man, I just went for it, man. It's been great too. It's been fun.
How did the Marquette job open up? So I know Matt Velasquez is doing the Bucks beat now, but kind of how did that process play out?
Charles Gardner, Charlie MF&G, as we like to call him around the office, he retired last year. Matt got kicked up to the Bucks job after that. And then after that, my boss came to me. He knew I'm a big basketball fan. He's familiar with my work, and he asked if I was interested in the job. And I said, yep, of course. And,
cool.
Just proceeded from there.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you.
So I prepared a few quick hitting questions, Ben. Now that the meat of the story is out of the way, here's some quick getting to know Ben Steele questions. All right?
Fire at me, man. I'm ready.
First off, topical because of the name of this pod. Have you been to Real Chili? And if so, how do you order your Real Chili?
Haven't been to the one on campus, but I've been to the one on Cathedral Square.
It's probably good now that you're an adult to avoid that one.
Yeah. How do I order it? I think I usually just get onions and cheese with that.
What's your favorite Marquette jersey color?
Ooh. I'm a big fan of the light blue. Classic.
Always a favorite. What's your favorite sports team overall, out of all sports?
You can say the Badgers.
I've been a journalist for 15 years, so like any rooting interest kind of been
That's true.
Beaten out of me, but I wouldn't say I'm a rabid fan, but I watch every Packers game.
I'm going to insert a question in here, Pete. So Ben, as a longtime reporter, how do you feel about that dichotomy of professionalism and fandom? And do you miss being a fan at all?
No, I wouldn't say I miss it. I'm not that. I was never like an emotional fan. More like I guess a connoisseur. That would be a good word for it. I never threw stuff when any team I was watching lost or any of that stuff. So
you're a better man than us.
Neighbor with the hard-hitting journalism theory questions here.
Just had to insert that right in the middle of the fun ones.
Yeah.
As a journalist, the only thing you're rooting for is really just a good story, man. That's just
right. Amen. All right, a couple more just real quick ones. Sobelmans or AJ Bombers?
I'm gonna go with my heart says Sobelmans. I like the jalapenos when they drop that on the top of the burn.
It's a must-have. And who has the best Bloody Mary in Milwaukee?
Ooh, I'm not a Bloody Mary guy. I'm out on that. I'm sorry.
All right.
The tomato juice. I can't do the tomato juice.
How about your best bar, your favorite bar in the city?
I live in Bayview. I'm a Bayview guy. So
Blackbird's
good. The Palm Tavern. I was there last night. I love that joint.
Cool.
Sugar Maple.
All right, and one more quick question. Just I'm curious about. So, do you travel with the team as the beat writer?
I travel to the road games, but I don't travel with the team. I make my own travel arrangements. So yeah.
Gotcha. And so far, what's been your best road game experience, best city that you've traveled to as a beat writer?
Well, my first ever road trip was to Providence, and so that was the game where Marcus dropped 52.
I recall that one.
Good luck charm.
Then after that, the bomb cyclone hit, and I was stuck in Providence for an extra day.
Yeah,
that was my very first road trip. It was pretty crazy. What all the stuff that went down.
A walk to remember, one might say.
If only Mandy Moore had shown up on the way.
Hopefully the fans aren't annoyed with all those questions, but I think that now we really know the true Ben Steele. So we can move forward with this basketball talk.
That was pretty easy. I wasn't.
I got one last one. One last. Has anybody ever called you Buns of Steel?
No, I get man of Steel a lot. That's never Buns of Steel.
All right.
Yeah, I've heard that.
All right, I'll claim that one then.
Be Steel, my beating heart. That's one.
So moving on into some basketball talk. Ben, I was reading some of your articles on the Journal Sentinel website just the other day, and in full disclosure for our listeners, we're recording this before the DePaul game, but after the Butler game. So we're recording this on Sunday, January 14th. And Ben, one of the headlines that you put in the kind of follow-up to the Butler game is that Steve Wojciechowski criticizes the effort, criticizes the defensive effort for his team in the Butler game. And I think clearly you look at the box score, you saw that game. Marquette was up 10 minutes left in the second half, but didn't have enough gas to close it. We've constantly called out the defense as an area of necessary area of improvement. When you look at kind of how Wojo is trying to bring this team along, how big of a component do you see effort from so many young guys on the team, effort and competition, is being a key ingredient for this team?
Yeah, I mean, that's always key. But like within a young team, I think they have a hard time communicating on the defensive end. You saw it in the Butler game. They were just attacking the paint consistently. Yeah. Like Marquette defenders were getting beat off the dribble. They weren't switching very well on screens. Like the back end rotation was all messed up. I think that's a factor of the youth and also, the smaller size of the Marquette guards, I think, comes into play with that. The freshman guys, I love Greg Elliott. Like, as a competitor, he's all in. I love his wingspan. He's a great defensive player, but he's skinny, man. He's just got to build up a little bulk. And, same thing with Jamal. His athletic skills are off the charts, but he gives up a little on the size end, and what Butler was able to do, Keelan Martin would get switched on to Greg Elliott, and Greg Elliott was just dwarfed by Keelan Martin's size, and that creates some problems for them.
Just to pick your brain from the beginning of the year, did you get the sense that Wojo thought that these two guys could or would be counted on this much throughout the season, or do you think it's more of a result of Cheatham leaving the program and Sakar not really being able to offer anything on the offensive end?
Yeah, I know he liked their potential, but I don't think he foresaw them playing 20 minutes a game or whatever they're playing now.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely as a result of Cheatham leaving after 5 games.
Do you predict that Marquette will show improvement in these last 12 games on the defensive end? Do you think they are capable of it? We saw it in the Seton Hall game, and it was like, well, if Marquette could play like this and give this effort and be smart on their rotations like this every game, we would have a juggernaut of a team. We already have one on one side of the ball, but it's every other Big East team makes us look silly on the defensive end, except in this one Seton Hall game. So do you think that they can put that together and give similar efforts to the one like they did in Seton Hall?
Yeah, I mean that Seton Hall game is certainly tantalizing. That makes you see that they're capable of it. But it's just the consistency. I don't. We're past the halfway point of the season. You would think that if it's going to come together, it's got to come together soon.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I just don't know if the consistency is going to be there. I don't know if you can count on it every game.
Well, and we haven't had a podcast since, kind of building off that question, Neighbor and Ben, we haven't had a podcast since the Seton Hall game or since the Butler game. You walk away from the Seton Hall game thinking, holy shit, like if this team can just like D up, like look what they could do. And then they play Butler, and Butler's a good team, and it was at Hinkle. But I'm still trying to put in context the defensive performance in Seton Hall, because there's nothing necessarily indicating that it wasn't an aberration. It wasn't dumb luck, but something of that order. And so kind of building off of that, when you're watching, Ben, you go to these games in person more, you kind of get to see these guys behind the scenes more. You mentioned the youth, and not only is it the freshmen, but we have the leaders of this team, who, in my mind, are Marcus Howard, are Sam Hauser, folks like that, and they're still just sophomores. So on the defensive end,
Mike never relents on taking a shot at Andrew Rowsey.
Hey, proof's in the pudding, man. When you're watching on the defensive end, who's talking, who's communicating? Like when you're watching on the court, who's not on the offensive end, but on the defensive end? Is there anyone that pops out to you as a leader defensively?
I would say that Sam Hauser's probably the quarterback of the defense. You could definitely see last game against Butler some frustration from Hauser. He was yelling at a lot of people on the way to the huddles. Not happy with rotations. He mentioned that after the game when breakdowns, and that on the back end of the rotations that led to layups. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely say Hauser's the guy that kind of more vocal, and he's been that way in the practices that I've attended. he's definitely shouted out orders at people on the defensive end.
And that wasn't meant as a shot at Andrew Rowsey. I just don't think he's a defensive leader.
Yeah, that's not his gig.
Right.
Ben, how, switching back to the offense, just how much fun is being able to cover a team that can shoot the ball this well?
It's great, man, but I can tell you the most difficult thing is trying to tweet during the game. You look down on your computer to try to type some, witty tweet in there, and then you miss 2 possessions because the ball's flying up and down the court. But yeah, it's super fun to watch those guys, man. Especially that Providence game when Howard we had those 8 points right after halftime, and you could just see that he had it going, man. And after that, it's one of the most impressive games I've ever been to in person.
So what was given the fact that you were at that game, that was your first, I think you said that was your first game you traveled to on the road?
Yep, first road game. Just
give us a feel of the vibe in the second half from the crowd. Was it just like, were they just in awe of what he was doing? What was the feel?
So I was underneath one of the baskets, the opposite side of where Marquette was going in the second half. So on the other side of the court. And there was a row of fans in front of me. There was a row of, I think, 2 rows of seats in front of me. And every time Howard hit a basket in the second half, they would just like stand up and shrug their shoulders at each other. And, they'd be in that thick Rhode Island accent, like, this guy's got 40. I can't stop this guy. We can't stop this guy.
Somebody put a body on him.
Throw some donuts at him.
Is the Rhode Island accent a Peter Griffin accent? Is that?
I don't know. I don't know how I sounded there, but but the Rhode Island accent was something to behold. That might have been a personal highlight of the road trip for me.
You had me convinced.
Yeah. And then once he hit 50, like, you were just people, the standard shock sports fan look with the 2 hands on top of their head. There was a lot of that going on at the Dunkin' Donuts Center.
Did any of the Providence fans start cheering for Marcus towards the end of the game when he was getting closer to 50 or 52?
No, there was a lot of venom directed toward the officials in that game, if I remember.
I remember.
I don't think there wasn't a lot of cheering for Marquette after that.
So, Ben, from your experience covering this team over the last few months, what's sort of the persona of this team? Is it more of like a laid-back squad having fun all the time in practice, or are they like all business all the time kind of group?
No, there's definitely a fun vibe to the team. I think they take their cues from Marcus, and he's I'm sure he's just a really fun kid. So they kind of take that vibe, I think, from him.
Ben, being around the team every day, Wojo, his press conferences aren't filled with witticisms, like a funny line a minute like we used to have in Buzz. Is he more of a character like when he's not in front of the mic, or can you tell us a little more like into his personality when he's not, on videotape?
He's a funny guy, man. I know it doesn't come across in his press conferences, but he'll come, he sees me hanging around, he'll come over and bust my chops a little bit, and he's still a young head coach. This is his 4th year, and he's still learning the job. I think eventually you'll start to see his personality shine a little through during press conferences and stuff. I think he's still getting the hang of it, just being the head guy.
Yeah. What do you think his best attribute as a coach is at the current moment?
It's just his intensity, man. It's just what you would expect. Just I don't know if you guys,
his floor slappiness.
Yeah. I mean, definitely his intensity. Like he doesn't accept any effort less than 100%. It drives him crazy.
Well, you can see his players respond to that. I think it was Brian Henry in a previous pod pointed out that almost cliche moment when there was a camera in the huddle. I think this was against Villanova, and we were on the brink of going down like 25 plus, and Wojo yelled at them right in their faces and said, "Compete, compete, compete," and they did. So that intensity that he has clearly translates to his players, not least of which are the freshmen and the kind of the defensive output. And I think that's interesting that you have echoed the kind of his humor, because I remember Jay Billis during the Maui Invitational, Jay Billis saying something in the same nature, saying, "You would not believe how funny this guy is, how great of a sense of humor he has behind the scenes." And it's interesting to me that doesn't carry over even in the least bit in any of the media he does.
Yeah, I think so. He takes his job very seriously. I mean, as he should.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He takes basketball very, very seriously. So I just don't think the humor comes across in that setting, you know.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing about the coaching staff, just that I've noticed since Wojo's been around, is that it seems like he gives his assistant coaches a lot of responsibility and coaching guys up one-on-one. For example, I don't know if certain coaches are assigned to certain guys, but it seems like whenever someone's talking to Marcus, it's usually Stan Johnson going in there talking to Marcus. What do those assistant coaches bring to the table? Is one guy an offensive guy, or is one guy a rah-rah guy? What do those guys bring?
I think it usually breaks down. Stan usually works with the big guys. You'll see him warming up the big guys. I think you see him talking to Marcus a lot just because they have a relationship going back to the Arizona State days.
Mm-hmm.
And Brett Nelson usually works with the guards. There's one story that I want to do. I think he works a lot with people's shots too, because if you remember him as a player, he was a great shooter when he was a. So I think it usually breaks down that way. And
do you think that Brett Nelson could be somewhat credited with the fact that we're the 6th most efficient offense and the 19th best effective field goal percentage in the country?
I think the whole staff has something to do with it, but yeah, I think on the offensive side of the ball, Nelson's got a lot to do with that. I don't know how to divvy up the credit for it, but he definitely deserves something.
So on this train of assistant coaches, I've got 2 questions. And the first one, I just want to hear a name. I kind of want to hear the first name that comes to mind, and we don't necessarily have to probe into it unless it's super interesting. For assistant coaches on the roster right now or on the coaching staff, which one do you see is most quickly becoming their own head coach at some point in the near future?
Yeah, it's either Stan or Brett. I think both those guys are going to be head coaches eventually, and I think they're both equal footing as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. In terms of game plans, I know every coaching staff, every program kind of puts together their offensive, defensive game plans in a different way. Do you have a sense of? I've always wondered, does a specific coach have the entire game plan? Kind of, are they in charge of just the Butler game plans, or do you have any sense of kind of how Wojos decided to divide up, putting together how they attack each game?
I can't really speak to that.
It's under lock and key, huh?
Yeah, I don't think they would tell me even if I asked, but that it's definitely interesting. I think the way it usually works, and I don't know if this is the case in Marquette's case, but usually one assistant will be assigned 3 teams in the Big East. Another coach would be assigned another 3 teams in the Big East, and they just compile the scouting reports on all those teams. But I don't know about game plans or I imagine Wojo's the final word and all that, but I can't speak to that. I don't really know.
Ben, going back to individual rosters, I was kind of wondering, there was a lot of hype before the beginning of the season about Harry Froling, just because he was a transfer, he was a big body. Marquette had lacked height coming in, we all knew that, and I think he probably, like most new players, the expectations were a little much for maybe a guy of his skill set, which we still haven't seen his full potential, obviously. But what has been your assessment of Harry Froling's play thus far?
He's really struggled. You look at the numbers. I think he's 1 of 12 on 3-pointers.
Oh, tell me about it.
He missed the easy layup in the last game.
You can tell his confidence is shaking.
Yeah, you could see him get frustrated with himself when he comes back to the bench after he's been substituted for. But they knew that it was going to take a while for him. When I was doing a story on him, every coach that I talked to just said it's not going to come for a while. And
interesting. Huh.
But he lost 60 pounds. He put on so much muscle. He was going to be an instant stud.
I'm not going to bury the kid for after 5 games or whatever he's played so far. Because I talked to a couple former players from Marquette that transferred in. And they said, it takes a long time just to get used to game speed. That year off is just it's hard to get back to that. He's definitely struggled. There's no question about that. But you can see it. You can see the form is there on a shot. Just the results not there.
That's what's surprising to me, because like every time he shoots, I mean, now I've kind of been conditioned to the point where like I'm like, oh, no way in hell that's going in. But the form is there, and it's not that far off where it's like,
it doesn't make me feel the same way as when I watch Sakar take a shot.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So hopefully that is something that gets worked out once he gets back more into game speed, game shape, and kind of gets in the rhythm.
And he's been pretty good on rebounding, and he's made a couple nice passes. He's forced a couple passes that, but
yeah, that football handoff to Desi Rodriguez that he basically allowed for a dunk. That was a pretty humorous one for me. But he has shown. You're right. He has shown a pretty good knack of passing, which is what Marquette needs out of their big men to be a little more well-rounded, don't you think?
Yeah, finding shooters from down low, or the high post, or wherever he's playing at.
So one of the things we've talked about a lot on this pod, at least I've talked about, has been this Andrew Rowsey, Marcus Howard kind of sharing the ball, not necessarily making sure they each get their own touches, but it seems like they both need a certain amount of touches to get into their rhythm, which makes perfect sense. I'm wondering if you have been, having the position you have and kind of seeing the things you've seen. Have there been conversations, or have you picked up on things about them trying to work through at least those two, or through the coaching staff, kind of how they share responsibilities and how the ball moves around and kind of gets distributed? Has any of that resonated or kind of come through in things that you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's just a feel thing, like game to game, you could tell which guys kind of got it going early, and then they'll kind of shift the focus to that guy. And then once the defense adjusts to that, the other guy would kind of fill in. And I think that's how they kind of play off each other. Just go with the hot hand and ride that for a little while, and then see what else they could do after that.
Do you get the sense that there's like almost I don't want to say competition. Sometimes when watching it feels like that. Like, was Rousey? Did you get the sense that like Rousey might have been jealous of Howard's 52 points, or when Rousey goes for 35, and Howard goes for 10? Like, do you sense that at all?
I don't think it doesn't get personal. I don't think, but I mean, they definitely know what each other's doing, and I think they both feel they can score 50 every game. So
yeah. Well, that's true.
I wanted to ask you, in terms of this team, we notice that they're improving throughout the season. We hope for a little more improvement defensively. What do you think? I think there's two aspects to improvement. There's what the coaching staff can apply to the team, and then there's individual performances out there on the court. So what would you say, is one thing that would really be a huge benefit from an individual player improvement standpoint, and what's something that the coaching staff can do to make this team better closer to the end of the season?
Well, defensively, I think definitely the communication, working on the defensive end, and you're starting to see it a little more with Theo playing a little bit better, but just that physical presence down low, or like an intimidation factor down low, you can start to see that coming through a little more. I think if that improves, I think that would significantly help the defense too.
Yeah, especially because that's a big part of the defense that I don't think we talk about. Like, we've talked about it, but not really in depth, is that Marquette doesn't have that rim protector, and Theo's their best one, but he's not known as a shot blocker. I mean, he can get them. He's got the athleticism to do it, but that's a huge part of the defense being ranked as low as we are. Is not just being beat off the dribble and communication, is that lack of size down there.
Yes, yeah, the rim protection. That's what they need.
Hopefully, we get the win at DePaul, and then we have a 9-day layoff before playing Xavier and Villanova back-to-back, at Xavier, home against Villanova. And we've played both of those teams already, so we'll be done with the Xavier and Villanova part of the season pretty soon. But what do you think Marquette can do to improve, to give us a shot at taking one of those two key games?
They definitely hung with Xavier when they played at the Bradley Center, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't remember Marcus's stats in that game, but I think he struggled a little bit shooting the ball.
He was 1 of 8 from three-pointer.
Yes, okay, yeah, I remember that. Okay. So if they can get a better shooting effort out of him on the road against Xavier, I think they might be able to steal that one. So beat DePaul, beat Xavier, Villanova. They're so good, man.
Well, we will be in the house for that game. I don't know. You probably didn't know that. So maybe we'll bring home a dub. I don't know.
That's right, we will. Yeah, we'll have to get a beer.
Yeah, so I mean, you go 2-1 in those 3 games.
That's
Marquette has to feel pretty good about that, and then they'd be in good shape to finish in at least 500 in the conference, which is the mark that would get you in the NCAA tournament for sure.
You think 9-9 gets them in for sure?
I think so.
I had one hard-hitting last question, and it is, what is the buffet like at the Bradley Center these days?
Oh, at the Bradley Center, having been to a few other road venues, the Bradley Center, and I've heard this from many other people, is the class eating venue in maybe the entire basketball landscape.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Bombshell.
Yeah.
I did not expect that from the mediocre chicken Alfredo I had back when I did one men's basketball game in 2008.
Yeah, they can bring it, man, but you haven't seen like the beef stroganoff at Providence.
Oh, gross. Just kind of an open-ended question. So as you're looking at this Marquette team and you're kind of thinking about the pieces that you're going to write over the coming weeks, what do you think is the most important thing for Marquette fans to really hone on in? Is this team, we've got 1/3 of the Big East, 1/3 of the Big East schedule down, 2/3 left. What do you think Marquette fans should really be keying in on if this team is going to make the NCAA tournament and hopefully make some waves in the tournament?
Defensive consistency, which we talked about a lot, and an aggressive Sam Hauser on offense. I think that would be very key to the success of this team the rest of the season.
I agree. I mean, I saw a couple quotes from Kevin Willard after that Marquette game, and he said, he was asked a question about Andrew Rowsey and Marcus Howard and about how difficult they are to defend. I mean, you might have put a link to this, actually, or maybe it was Anonymous Eagle, I can't remember. But what Sam Willard, what's his name now? Kevin Willard, what his answer was completely about Sam Hauser and not about those other two guys. So basically saying like the other Big East coaches fully believe that Sam Hauser is kind of the straw that stirs the Marquette beverage, which is a crisp Miller Lite, ideally.
Coaches love Sam Hauser because he does a little bit of everything. Coaches love that guy.
All right, I have one more question because I don't want to let Ben off the hook for being a Badger. We got to hit you with this one question. I thought that this year would be a competitive game against Wisconsin. It obviously wasn't. When do you see Wisconsin being able to compete with Marquette again?
Wow. That's
loaded question.
It's a very loaded question. No, actually, I talked with a little bit about this with an Appleton radio station the other day, and he was at heels that the momentum has shifted toward the Marquette side in the MU-UW rivalry. And, after the recruitment of Joey Hauser and the game earlier this season at the Kohl Center, you can definitely feel a different kind of shift. Next year, Marquette's going to be even deeper and be even better. So looks to be that way for the next couple of years at least.
Well, we certainly agree with that here and are very happy about that.
I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah, and hopefully if any other Badger fans are listening, that just hammers home that seasonal depression disorder.
Jeez. Well, we consider ourselves pragmatic homers here on the Real Chili podcast. Ben, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your Sunday to join us here on the podcast. Hopefully we can find some time.
Is that what day is?
Yeah, exactly. Hope we can find a time to talk to you again in the future. Maybe once we get closer to March. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more fun things happening this season. But thanks so much for taking the time to join the show. We really appreciate you joining and had a fun time talking with you.
Yeah, this was awesome, man. Thanks, guys. Like I said, always remember my first podcast and my first Skype call. This is one for the memory books.
There you go. All right, folks, signing off for Pete Mohan and Pete Worth. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. That's going to do it for us here at the Real Chili Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.